Okay, so let's get right into it. The Chris Watts case. It's honestly one of the most chilling true crime stories from the last decade. And what makes it so uniquely haunting is just how much of it was caught on camera. We're talking hundreds of videos, from police body cams, home security, even Shanann's own social media, that let us piece together this absolute tragedy almost in real time.
You know, to anyone looking in from the outside, the Watts family had it all figured out. They projected this perfect, happy image. A loving husband, a devoted mom, and two absolutely adorable little girls. It was the American dream, right?
But the reality, well, it was a complete nightmare. This man, Chris Watts, strangled his wife Shanann, who was 15 weeks pregnant with their son Nico. Then he drove her body to an oil field where he worked, smothered his two little girls, Bella and Celeste, and dumped their bodies into giant oil tanks.
So that perfect facade, it started to crack on August 13th, 2018. When police show up for a welfare check because Shanann missed a doctor's appointment, Chris Watts' behavior is immediately, well, it's just weird. It's off. Think about it. If your pregnant wife and two small children are missing, you'd be frantic, right? You'd be telling the cops, break the door down, get in there now. But Chris, he actually tells the officer on the phone to wait for him to get there. Then, once he arrives, instead of making panicked calls, he sends these really stilted, performative text messages. He even makes a big show of pointing out Shannon's wedding ring to a neighbor. His goal was obvious. He was trying to plant the seed that she had just up and left him.
So just as Chris is trying to spin this story, his neighbor, Nate, steps in with something that completely changes the game. He tells the cops he has a security camera, and it's pointed right at Chris's driveway. And this, right here, is the moment the whole investigation pivots.
The camera footage showed this one critical detail. Nate, the neighbor, points out that Chris always parked his big work truck on the street. Always. But on that specific morning, he backed it all the way up the driveway, deep into the garage. And the reason for that is just horrifying. It was so he could load the bodies of his wife and daughters into the truck, completely hidden from view. You can literally watch Chris's composure just dissolve as he sees this footage with the police. He starts fidgeting, his body gets all tense, and then, in this moment of pure subconscious panic, he puts his hands behind his head. It's almost like he's practicing being arrested. His body knew he was caught long before his mouth was ready to admit it.
With the evidence starting to stock up, Chris tried to get out ahead of the narrative. He actually agreed to do a TV interview, but his public performance was so deceptive, it only dug him a deeper hole. He honestly looks like a guy who lost his car keys, not his entire family. He's weirdly calm, so detached, and at several points, he actually cracks a smile. There's just this total disconnect between his words of worry and the actual emotion on his face. Now, you contrast that with Shanann's best friend, who's standing right there, just visibly shattered, and you can see the stark difference between real grief and a terrible performance. Later, in the interrogation room, he tries to paint this picture of himself as this passive, gentle person. He's building a character for the detectives, the kind of quiet guy who just wouldn't be capable of violence. It's a classic defensive move. And this is a really key principle in criminal psychology. See, when you accuse an innocent person of something truly horrific, their first reaction is almost always righteous anger. How dare you? But guilty people, they rarely get angry. They get defensive. They start explaining and justifying, building that narrative just like Chris was doing. The detective then sets this brilliant little trap. He asks Chris a really simple question. When we find the person who did this, what should happen to them? I mean, any grieving father would be screaming for blood, right? But Chris can't even fake it. He knows the detective is talking about him, so he just meekly offers up life in prison. He's so deep inside his own lie that he can't produce the one emotion everyone on Earth would expect: pure rage. So what was really going on behind that perfect Facebook facade? Well, thanks to thousands of text messages and Shanann's own social media posts, we have a painfully clear picture of a marriage that was in its final agonizing moments. This quote from Shanann to one of her friends is just, it's absolutely heartbreaking. It shows that these problems weren't new. For almost their entire relationship, she felt like she was the only one putting in the work, the only one fighting for their family. Their text messages really tell the whole story. You see Shanann sending these long, emotional paragraphs, just begging him to connect, to fight for them.
And his replies? They're short, cold, dismissive, one-word answers. She was pouring her heart out, and he was giving her absolutely nothing back. The conversation had flatlined.
And the evidence of his detachment is just everywhere. In their family videos, he often seems like a robot, just going through the motions. You should watch the video where Shanann surprises him with the news of her third pregnancy. He can barely crack a smile. And the reason, we now know, is because he was deep into an affair with a coworker. He had completely checked out, so much so that he literally threw a relationship self-help book that Shanann gave him right into the trash. So let's bring all of this together. Chris tried to sell this story that he just snapped, that it was a spontaneous act of rage, a moment of madness. But the evidence, it overwhelmingly points to a cold, calculated, and premeditated plan. And here's the ultimate, staggering irony of this whole case. Back in 2012, for a class presentation, Chris Watts actually gave a speech on the topic of relationship breakdown and repair. The man who would go on to annihilate his family once stood in front of a classroom, bizarrely, teaching other people how to hold theirs together. His actions in the hours right after the murders, that's what proves this was a plan. This wasn't a spontaneous crime. Immediately after, he looked up the lyrics to a Metallica song about destroying your own family. He called his daughter's school to unenroll them, and he called a realtor to start the process of selling the house. These are not the actions of a man in a blind rage. This is the cleanup phase of a planned execution.
And this brings us to the one central, baffling question that everybody asks about this case. Why? Why murder? If you wanted a new life, why not just get a divorce?
The answer, it seems, lies in his profound narcissism and his absolute cowardice. He couldn't stand the idea of being seen as the bad guy. He didn't want the financial hit. He didn't want the public shame of being the man who walked out on his perfect family. So in his twisted mind, erasure was just easier than divorce. He wanted to wipe the slate completely clean and just start over with no baggage.
You know, Chris Watts perfectly embodies the psychological archetype that some experts called the fake gentleman. These are people who project a quiet, polite, nice guy image to the world, but it's all a mask. And when they get caught, their tears aren't for their victims, they are for themselves. It's self-pity. And that's why, even today, Chris blames everyone else. He's blamed his wife, his mistress, even Satan, but he has never taken true, genuine responsibility.
And all of this leaves us with a final, really unsettling thought. The Watts family looked perfect on Facebook. They looked happy in every photo. This case is just a terrifying reminder that we never, ever truly know what goes on behind closed doors. And it forces us to question all those perfectly curated realities that we see online every single day.